Frihetsgrumbeere in alle frie, Middagsgrumbeere met saure brie, Ovensgrumbeere met samte Kleid, bis in alle Ewigkeit. Amen.
You're about to see some amazing video footage from 1987 of a historic stone house being taken down. It sat undisturbed for 220 years along Shantz Road in what is now Upper Macungie Township near Allentown, Pennsylvania. The house was built in 1767 by Georg Steininger, Jr., a son of Georg Steininger, Sr., who was one of the original settlers of the Macungie area. Georg Jr. was born in Maxitawny, Pennsylvania in 1730. His parents and siblings had landed in Philadelphia 3 years earlier, in 1727. They had immigrated from the Palatinate in what is now southwest Germany, a region then devastated by a century of religious and political violence. The Steiningers, who were Lutheran, were among the thousands of German-speaking Lutheran, Reformed, and Anabaptist people who came to southeastern Pennsylvania when it was a British colony. Some were fleeing religious persecution, and others were seeking a better life. The English settlers called them Dutch, from which comes the term Pennsylvania Dutch. By 1776, there were an estimated 100,000 German-speaking people in Pennsylvania, a third of the population. These settlers brought with them their customs, their artistic expressions, their foods, their dialect, as well as their expert farming, trade, and construction skills. After living in Maxitawny for a time and welcoming Georg Jr. to the family, Georg Sr. decided to establish a farm north of present-day Briningsville. In 1735, he took out a warrant for 200 acres of land and brought his wife and 5 children by horse and cart to start their new life in the neighboring valley known then as Macungie. Where the first Steininger home stood in present-day Briningsville isn't known. What is known is that Georg Sr.'s 200 acres sat along what is now Shantz Road, just west of Grimm Road. The original homestead probably stood near the spot where Georg Jr. built his house. The original house was likely a 1.5-story log house with a large central chimney and cooking hearth. Macungie was then part of Bucks County. It was given its name by the Leni-Lenape tribe, who called it the feeding place of the bears. The natives enjoyed its rich hunting grounds with its oak trees, swamps, and meadows. They did open-pit mining for jasper, which they used for weapons and ornaments and tools. But by the early 1700s, most of the natives had been forced to live beyond the Blue Mountain and were eventually pushed westward. The arriving Europeans began claiming this fertile land in what is now called the Lehigh Valley, and over a span of 30 years, the landscape changed drastically and forever. German immigrants traveled up the King's Highway, finished by 1735, which went from Philadelphia to Jeremiah Trexler's tavern at what is now Trexlertown. Forests were chopped down, houses and barns were built out of logs and stone, and horses were used to work the land. As these settlers poured into what is now Lehigh County, they began to petition for the creation of townships. With the new King's Highway running through it, the residents of Upper Milford were first, forming their township in 1738. The settlers of Macungie followed soon after. In 1743, Georg Sr. and 16 other men sent a petition for the creation of Macungie Township to the court of Bucks County. This new township, with its farms and rolling hills, had 650 residents. By 1766, among the 134 farms that dotted the Macungie landscape, there were people with the names of Dorney, Breinig, Grimm, Fogel, Trexler, Shankwaller, and Steininger. Their land holdings ranged in size from the 7 acres of Michael Grebs to the large tracts of around 400 acres each, belonging to Melcher Bear, John Lichtenwallner, Herman Moore, and Stoffel Stetler. An average-sized farm was 142 acres, with half or more of the land uncultivated. George Sr. was a good friend of John Lichtenwallner, the common ancestor of all the Lichtenwallners in the United States. John and George were the first trustees of Jordan Lutheran Church, located in what is now Orfield. The two men traveled to Philadelphia in April 1744 to secure a warrant for 50 acres of land for the church. The Steininger and Lichtenwallner families were members of Jordan Lutheran Church for generations. George Jr. likely exchanged his wedding vows with his wife Elizabeth in the log church that first stood there. Records show that at least 2 of their children were baptized there. As George Sr. grew old and prepared his will in 1761, he planned for the transfer of 200 acres to his son George. George Jr. was already married to Elizabeth by this time, and they had at least 2 children. As the land passed from father to son, George Jr. made plans to build a grand farmhouse for his growing family. This would be no ordinary log house like most of his neighbors had. It would be a 2-story house built of limestone and stuccoed, with a roof structure massive enough to support a tile roof. Walls would be painted and decorated with stencils. In 1767, as the stone walls rose up to the 2nd story, the date stone was added to the front of the house. This happened to also be the same year that George Sr. passed away. Tax records show that by the time the house was finished, George Jr. had 3 horses, 6 cattle, 8 sheep, and 1 indentured servant. In addition to being a farmer, he was also a blacksmith. Some of the crops that he and his neighbors grew were apples, wheat, corn, potatoes, and flax. 2 years went by, and then tragedy struck. How George Jr. died in 1769 isn't known, but at age 39, he passed away suddenly without a will. He left behind his wife and 6 children, 1 over the age of 14 and the rest under. The youngest was 1 year old. Their names were Anna Maria, George, Anna Margaretha, Christian, Maria Elizabetha, and Johannes. His widow Elizabeth appeared before the Orphans' Court in Easton in June of 1770. John Lichtenwallner joined her. They appeared before 4 judges. One was William Allen's son, James Allen, who built Trout Hall in Allentown. Another was George Taylor, who 6 years later would become one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. The court appointed male guardians for Elizabeth's children. These men were legally responsible for the children until they reached age 21. They facilitated the payment of taxes on Elizabeth's land until 1782, after her death. That year, the court granted the property to their oldest son, 21-year-old George, who had served the previous year as a private in the 1st Battalion of the Northampton County Militia. As decades went by, the farm passed from father to son. In 1876, it was owned by George Jr.'s great-grandson, Solomon Steininger. In the 1940s, Upper Macungie Township was still a patchwork of family farms as far as the eye could see. In 1982, the former Steininger homestead was still a working farm. The original farmhouse and Springhouse were standing, and all of the surrounding land was farmland. But by 1987, once again the landscape was about to be changed drastically and forever. Development that had already begun in the 1970s was about to accelerate in a major way. Family farms were going to be replaced with housing developments and warehouses. In 1987, the house was taken down by Ken Muth, an architectural preservationist. It had stood for 220 years. Georg Steininger had built it so well that it could have stood for several more centuries. In 1992, the barn was still standing, and the area around it was still farmland. Development was beginning at Grimm Road. 7 years later, in 1999, the barn was still standing, and development slowly continued at Grimm Road. But by 2005, the barn was gone, and the landscape had been transformed by new housing developments and the preparation for warehouses. By 2020, the warehouses were fully built. Here is the site of the former Steininger farm today. The original Springhouse stood by the stream along the yellow trees in the foreground. The farmhouse was right across the street. That spot is now the backyard of these houses along Whitman Drive in Briningsville. Many years ago, a King's Highway brought the original settlers to this region. Today, it has been the close proximity to an interstate that has brought in new residents. Many people appreciate these changes, which have created new communities for people to live in. Others are grateful for the jobs and the products these companies have brought to the region. And then there are those who mourn, like the natives did, the loss of something irreplaceable that once was precious to them.
Here we have a house that I bought from Janel Farms that was built by Georg Steininger in 1767. A real good example of an 18th century house. I've already exposed the roof and we've done a lot of work inside. I want to take pictures here as we dismantle everything. Hoping everything works out okay. Originally, the house was just a pointed limestone, stuccoing, and a brick facade was put over later on. Here sits what is a Springhouse now, could have been one of the earlier sites that could have been an earlier house that Mr. Steininger had built for himself. This Shantz Road is really a busy intersection, and someday it'll probably be a real major road. In the middle of the house there, you can see the spot where the date stone was. that I've taken out, and I'll take pictures later on. The Victorian porch, which was added later, is not a part of the original house. Tore the porch off today. That, of course, was not an original part of the house either. This was a center fireplace home. Probably had a beautiful massive walk-in fireplace on the kitchen side with a 5-plate stove on the chamber side or parlor side. I'm going to shut this off, go inside, and see if I can take some shots inside. While I'm taking these pictures inside to show the center beam and the joist, which would have been on the parlor and chamber side, the center fireplace being in the middle of the house. It's got a gorgeous 12 by 15 center beam with beautifully beaded detailed edges on both corners, beautifully beaded joists, all of it being of oak. I'm not sure how the color is going to come out here. Originally, I presume it wasn't painted, but predominantly on the parlor side here, they had a yellowish green color. Continued over next to where a partition must have been here, which should have been the chamber side. Chamber side, everything here sort of looks like a black with a whitewash over paint. Again, we've stripped everything on the inside here to expose all this. You had beautiful 7 by 9 small window panes in these windows here that now I'll just have the modern storm windows in. Beautiful sills, 20-some inch taper walls. I'm going to try to take a picture on this side, which would have been the kitchen side. In the middle of this home now stands a staircase, which where the original walk-in or center fireplace was. This also is a beautiful center beam which ran into the inner parts of the fireplace. It's painted a nice salmon color. Joists are beaded and the center beam beaded also. I'm going to try to get a close-up shot to show some of the detail. I don't know whether this will take. It looks to me that everything is looking okay. This, of course, was the entranceway. These are the Victorian staircases that they put in when they remodeled the house in about 1880, 1890. See if I can get you a cross-section of this beam here. All the joists, of course, are mortised into the center beam, and then a pin is driven down from the top to hold them in place. One of the nicest features of this house that's still here is this feather edge partition wall, which was hidden behind later on partitions. It really wasn't damaged that bad. This side has a beautiful color to it. Salmon in color, probably pertains to what they originally painted. It also has some decoration there. Those black spots pertain, I think, to a potato type decoration placed on a few of the intermittent panels. Here again, we ripped out some of the modern renovations to expose the beautiful joists underneath. That would be the third floor or the attic, but we'll walk up into. Sample again of the windows with tapered walls. I removed the sills just to see exactly what they did in applying them. Again, this partition wall wasn't here originally. It's where the center fireplace went up. There also was a partition wall here that extended from the chimney. That's in the possession of Frank Tersha, which did this remodeling right before Janel bought it. Now we're going into the attic to look at one of the nicest parts of the whole house. Take a look at some of the flooring here. Some of these boards are 22 inches wide with an average size of about 16. Here you can see some of the detail that's done. The typical heavily constructed roof that was probably meant to have tile on it. Whether it did or not, I do not know. The whole structure or particular method is very typical of what would have been the bottom or a boat hull. Beautiful work, all oak. I'm going to mark this, disassemble it, put it into my inventory. At the present time, I don't have a client. The flooring we're looking at here, and the joist structure, some of the center beams, and joists, I think William DuPont will want. Take a look at that barn. That barn was not put here until about 1900. The original barn there probably burned down at one time. Of course, here is where the center chimney originally came up and went right up through the rafter section there. The original stairs that came up from the first floor entered in this corner I'm standing at right now. Came up through the attic floor here and also from the first floor to the second floor in this particular southeast corner of the house. The house situates itself on a plot in a southeasterly direction, east-westerly direction, with the south side being facing the sun, the front entranceway, the back being the north side. Of course, when the center fireplace was here, this particular steel rod wasn't here. It's presently supporting the center beam below me. Here's a shot of the Springhouse, or the early inhabited house here. Again, probably a lot of the noise you'll hear on this is the traffic that's on this route. It's pretty windy out here today. Here's a picture of the rafters we took off today, off this 1767 house. Pictures of the roof structure, trusses, purlins, collar beams, cross buck bracing. It's going to a client I have in Downingtown. It's going to be put up exactly the same way. We took a look at it, only he's not going to use the rafters, just the trusses and the cross buck and purlins plate. In the last couple days, we took the flooring up here in the second floor. All it has to do is be removed and loaded. Again, I'm showing the detail on this center beam. 12 by 15, it's 20 foot long. Get a good picture of this center beam from the top. Gotta remove all the joists, take the pins out. Good picture of that cross buck design. See some of these real nice wide floorboards. some of the areas where we've taken them out. Today we're disassembling the roof structure, loading it up and getting it ready. Okay, we're ready to take off one of the trusses. Here you can see what they look like when it's braced up. Real nice structure. Here we got a nice picture of the crossbuck X braces. Ready to take them down. Here we got Sean and Dennis finishing up, putting the last X brace on. You have anything to say, Dennis?
This is fun. I like it.
You like that? That's nice. That X brace is really nice.
Yeah, my arm's getting tired.
Yeah. Okay, here we're taking a look at the two center beams out of the 1767 house. We're going to be wrapping them with carpet, loading them on the trailer. You can see there's not too much left of the house anymore. Today we should be able to wrap everything up. Okay, we're down here at Williams' place to unload material from the Georg Steininger house. I didn't get to take any pictures of this stone tablet, but here we are. He's going to use it in his addition. I didn't think it was going to be so hard to get in the road down here. Handling this Pennsylvania German wood here today.
I feel like a Pennsylvania Dutchman.
A Dutchman?
We shipped it all from our country originally, Ken.
It's the last load you're going to get in here until you clean it up.
That'd be 2001.
I'm hoping Bill starts the addition next year and then it'll all be cleaned out that way.
What powder of piss?
There's one in the house making iced water.
Look at that board there. Oh my God. Does that one have a hole in it? Sure it does.
Yeah.
Save that one for Clay. You know when those were made?
Benchtop tables with
1767.
No.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Hey, look at that. You see?
Yeah, that'll be flat.
Look at that script writing on that one there.
Let's do a tractor in there. Yes.
No, let's start the other way. What are you doing? What is it?
I don't know. So that's German.
It's rough one.
These couple here, these here go over on the top of that other pile.
These here too?
No, just there's these couple right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They have to go in that other pile because they're with the other group.
And this one.
And this one.
That one there.
And that. Is that? No. Yeah, that goes in the other pile over there. And that one next to it.
How about these three, Ken?
No, they go over. This one. No, that goes over.
What do you got these all marked somehow?
I know what you did. There are two different lots. You can see it
Where does this go?
right there where he's at. Okay, the rest of this is in the middle. Good.
Joe, Hawk and Bullfrog on the string, swilly wick bum boom. I may not let him shine a thing, swilly wick bum boom. Tory Taylor, swilly wick bum, Irish sailor, Tory Taylor, swilly wick bum boom. Joe, Hawk and Bullfrog on the stake, swilly wick bum boom. I saw I hate my chinks to be made, swilly wick bum boom. Tory Taylor, swilly willy wing bum, Hiram sailor, Tory Taylor, swilly willy wing bum bum. Joe Hawk and Bullfrog over the fence, swilly willy wing bum bum. I saw the head my cheeks and sweats, swilly willy wing bum bum. Tory Taylor, swilly willy wing bum, Hiram sailor, Tory Taylor, swilly willy wing bum bum. Joe Hawk and Bullfrog over the dock. Swilly willy wick bum boom. I saw my cheeks be knocked. Swilly willy wick bum boom. Tory Taylor,